To throw it. And intercepted. Daxton Hill. Uyunglele. Touchdown, Ross. They go with a run at 3rd and 3, and that's blown up right at the point. John Ridgway. Four-man front for the Dogs, drifting back in cover. There comes the pressure. Quay Walker. Shot out of a cannon.
Bennett. Near side. Pass is caught. George Pickens.
Gary lost a yard his first one. They bank it to him, and smothering the quarterback is Tyreek Smith.
Welcome, Barflies, to another edition of Draft on Tap, and this is a very special one. We've got two very special guests, and one person missing, at least for a good portion of the show. Neil Stopchinski is taking care of some family matters, and so we wish him well. And but Danny Shimon is here. Danny, how are you, my friend?
I am here. I'm excited. We are 2 weeks away from the NFL draft, and like I said last week, man, this is Christmas time for me. Wrapping all the gifts and putting them under the tree, and now counting all your gifts. And this is where it gets all nice and the juices get flowing, and everyone gets excited about who the Bears are going to pick or who their respective team that they're rooting for is going to be picking. So very, very excited for today's show.
Well, I know on the top of your Christmas list was Eric Edholm. You said, please get this guy on. I love talking football with him. And guess what? Here's your present. Eric Edholm is with us. The lead draft analyst over at Yahoo Sports. Eric, how are you?
Well, I'm doing great. I got to say, though, if I'm atop your Christmas list, you got to make a better list, man. I'm sorry. I'm happy to be here. More than thrilled to come on. But I'm telling you, aim higher, man. I'm not that great.
I love talking ball with you. I love talking draft with you. So that's the thing. It's like we connected back at the in Senior Bowl a couple years ago, and ever since then, you've been an awesome guest every year. So we appreciate you jumping on with us.
I think of myself as the the socks of Christmas gifts, but I appreciate all the bouquets you're throwing my way. Yeah.
Hey, Eric, I'd like to ask you a couple of quick questions before I take off and take care of some of my own family.
Yeah.
You live in Chicago. I mean,
I
you
do.
cover the entire NFLs, but you live in Chicago. So you're pretty close to what is going on with the Chicago Bears. What do you think about the plan that Ryan Poles has put in place? It's basically a destroy everything and start from scratch. Is this something that you're comfortable with as an analyst?
And first of all, just for the local folks, I don't live in the city proper. I know that's a big issue when you say when you're from Chicago, right? I live out in the northwest suburbs, but I did live in the city for a long time, so I can kind of claim that. Yeah, I mean, I figured there would be, some sort of house cleaning that was, a good spring cleaning. Everyone needs one, right? Anytime a new, GM or scouting staff takes over, a new coaching staff as well, you're going to see changes. You're going to see people they're familiar with that they bring in and say, all right, I know this person can do this thing. We've seen that a couple times with the Bears. Obviously, I think people were maybe expecting some real fireworks, some big free agent splashes. I feel like, even without the first round pick, that was a big ask. And I think they had to do some, some maintenance work first before they could, put on a fresh coat of paint on the outside. So, it's a part of a process. And, I thought the Bears' depth was a real problem last year at times, and injuries and things like that. When they had their, starters 4 or 5 years ago, they were in great shape, but slowly it's eroded over time. And that's part of the issue.
And how big of a challenge does Ryan Poles face here? I mean, obviously not the greatest cap situation, at least for the 2022 season, but he's clearing up cap space for 2023.
Sure.
Not a lot of draft capital this year. So far, they've got all their draft capital next year. Is this something that you think that Bears fans can be hopeful that by as early as 2023, we could walk away with at least a winning record and a playoff push?
Right. I mean, obviously just big picture, you look and you say, where the Vikings and Lions are in kind of the same space that the Bears are in, trying to, figure out their identity, new regime in Minnesota, 1-year-old group in Detroit, and, a lot of work done in those places as well. And obviously the Packers still ahead of the division, but, towards the end of the Aaron Rodgers era and everything. So, big picture, I think they're in a really good spot, especially if Justin Fields pans out the way a lot of people think he can, and myself included. I'm a I'm still buying stock and, still believing in his upward mobility if they can help him out. There's obviously some offensive needs that I think will be addressed either in the draft or in, the remaining free agents after the draft. And, that's sort of one caveat I'll give to people who feel like, they didn't get their Christmas list crossed off, everything they asked for. It's tough, first of all, without a first round pick to do that. And second of all, there are many ways to fill needs. The draft is, I think, really theoretically the last way you should be filling needs. Not that you can't, of course, if everything lines up, your highest rated players fill areas of big need. That's great. You cross that box off, but realistically, you're trying to accumulate talent. The Bears still have a talent void that needs to be filled. So it takes time. Yeah. I mean, by next year, I would assume they're going to be in a much cleaner place than where they are right now, but there are far worse teams as well.
And my last question before I turn it over to Danny is, there was a prominent reporter who created quite a stir on Chicago sports radio and throughout social media, saying that this was perhaps a season that the Bears brass was going to evaluate quarterback Justin Fields, and it's almost like a prove-it year for that young quarterback. And that's actually something that Kevin Fishbane here locally had written about at The Athletic 2 or 3 weeks ago, that this was kind of an evaluation year. Do you take that kind of mindset if you are a new general manager and working with a very young quarterback who you did not draft?
Yeah.
Or what's your overall opinion on that?
Anything Fishbane writes is garbage. Let me tell you. No, I've known Kevin a long time. We're buddies. Yeah, no. I mean, it's a fair point, right? I think that was probably true, with Mitch Trubisky, and so obviously he was taken higher than Fields and cost more. And so, yeah, I mean, that's going to be true anytime that GM and that head coach weren't part of the selection process. And, year one was, you give them an incomplete grade, I think, because there were some good things, the things we liked. Second half in Pittsburgh looked great. And, there was some, the plays in, I think it was the 49ers game that was, eye-opening and things that make you think, boy, with a better surrounding cast, things can be really exciting around here. But I would say that's not out of the ordinary, but I wouldn't say that, Ryan Poles was secretly telling journalists, hey, make sure you put it out there that we don't like Fields or that we're evaluating him. I don't think it's because that has happened in the past where, people with teams that are connected and kind of drop hints that, maybe we're not as thrilled with the quarterback as the fans seem to be. And, that's definitely occurred in the past, but this is probably as much typical procedure as it can be, I think.
Very cool. All right. I'll be listening in on my modern transistor radio, and I'll be back really soon. Danny, have fun.
Yeah, you can walk away, Aldo. I got this from here. So just kind of touching real quick there, Eric, on terms of Aldo brought up that the Bears are kind of doing, or Ryan Poles specifically doing a little bit of house cleaning here. I've heard a lot of steam pick up in terms of the Robert Quinn trade rumors. Typically when there's steam, there's a fire, or however the saying goes. But have you heard anything? And do you think that's something that could come to fruition during the draft, or maybe even like a day or two prior to the draft starting?
Yeah, it's not something I'd thought of previously, or at least in the last, couple weeks or anything like that. I know it had been mentioned as a possibility. Some people speculating, obviously we know Mac's gone and, other pieces have been kind of blown up a little bit, but, it's not the kind of thing that was on my front burner or anything like that, but wouldn't shock me, absolutely. I mean, it would certainly leave a void and make you kind of wonder who, the rushers are going to be, and would that just all of a sudden vault to the top spot? It's a different defensive system. So certainly anytime you have a major change like that, you're going to look into the possibility, but and teams always need pass rushers. He's coming off a great year. Like, his value couldn't be higher, especially, boy, when you consider what happened in 2020, it felt like Quinn was just a shocking disappointment. And to have him come back and play the way he did last year was, pretty eye-opening for me. And I was almost as surprised as I was him playing poorly the year before. So yeah, again, without knowing his financial numbers, I would say it's highly likely or possible.
I got my eyes on the Chiefs because the Chiefs are looking for
Sure.
a pass rusher. They have a multiple. I think they have 12 picks coming into the draft, and
That's
obviously
right.
the connection between Poles and Veach
Great point.
and that could be something that just to keep an eye on and see what happens there with KC. But heading to the draft here, my favorite time of year, as I mentioned earlier, beginning of the show, 2 weeks from tonight, it'll be round one in Vegas, Nevada, and that should be wild. Are you gonna be at the draft this year, or are you gonna be doing it from home?
You're like the third person to ask me today, and the answer, and sadly, is no. And I have some family out there I haven't seen in forever. In fact, one not since my wedding. But yeah, I was sort of thinking about going, but we weren't able to get our live show out there and everything, and so I'll be staying here from the burbs watching on TV, which is too bad because I'm sure Vegas is going to be a spectacle. And I know how badly they wanted the draft 2 years ago when the pandemic shut everything down.
Right. If this is the 1 year to attend the draft is this year, the Vegas year. I could use, like I said, I think it's going to be off the charts in terms of activities and fun and all that stuff. But getting to the actual draft itself, so obviously, I think the build up to the draft is, at least for me, it's been kind of like a ho hum in terms of there isn't the big star, like the big quarterback class was last year, and everyone's kind of just throwing out stuff. But I think Jacksonville even mentioned, Belk even mentioned that no one's even calling for that first overall pick. So I'm curious, typically when we go into a draft not expecting big things to happen, we get shocked, right? So, do you have any idea of, if you had to guess in terms of what would be the biggest headline we'll see coming out of this draft, say come Monday morning, what do you think would be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be, the kind of thing that would really shock people would be, now, again, this isn't me predicting it's necessarily going to happen, but something that's, even semi-plausible, Kenny Pickett falling, right? And I'm not just saying that because he wasn't on the draft invite list. He has plans. Apparently, he's going to be with his family or whatever. But, if there's a quarterback you could see possibly sliding a little bit more than some of the mock drafts have him, I think he's probably the guy, So like you said, not a lot of blue chip talent, and that's not besmirching, the guys who are going to go the first 10 picks. It's just not the same type of thing without at least one Trevor Lawrence level prospect or somebody who's a little bit more of a lightning rod or what have you. So we don't have that this year. The quarterback scenarios are really interesting, where Malik Willis ends up going, and do we get a third quarterback or a second quarterback for that matter in the first round? I think the answer is probably yes, but you never know. And, there's some people who have a high appreciation for Desmond Ridder. Maybe they look at Ridder and see a little bit more steady performer than Pickett. So, if I were to just sort of look at the possible shocker, that might be it. I don't know how far he'd fall, but, there are some teams, so I don't necessarily feel like have – franchise quarterback stamped all over him or anything like that. So, it's something that would be worth watching.
In terms of those first 15 players or so, that range, who do you think will make the biggest impact next year as a rookie, if you had to pick one guy?
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy choice. And I think Aiden Hutchinson just is such a high floor player. He's going to work his way into a lineup and, have a successful career. But I think he's just going to be ready for the rigors of the NFL early on, even if he is a little bit shorter armed than you like. And, may not be a true sack artist at the next level. I guess the question would be which receiver would jump, because the last couple of years we've had some incredible rookie receiver performances. Wasn't always the case in the past. It took 2-3 years for some of these guys to develop. Depending on where Chris Olave lands, I think his experience and his route running craftiness and everything, I think he has a chance to be a really good rookie. Maybe not quite on that Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson level, but could he be as good as Terry McLaurin was a couple of years ago? Yeah. Devontae Smith last year, sure. Jalen Waddle, et cetera. I wouldn't be shocked if he lands in a prolific offense to see him really do well early on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, receiver is a hot topic here in Chicago. The fans our listeners are avid about in terms of they want us to break down Neil and I to break down the receiving class, and I keep telling you there's a lot of depth in this class. I love Chris Olave. I love Garrett Wilson as well. It's kind of weird because the top two players in this draft are what everyone is deeming the top two players, and Jameson Williams and Drake London are both coming off of injuries, so it's kind of hard to gauge in terms of how far or how high these guys are going. But yeah, Chris Olave is a guy that it could be a major impact player in that receiving core, depending, again, like you mentioned, which team he lands with. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how that goes there. But, talking about the Bears, like in terms of the receiving core, like who is a guy that you think could be in that prime top of the second round area? I mean, we've been going through a list of players here with our listeners, just trying to give them an idea. Guys like Christian Watson, and my personal favorite, I don't know if he's going to make it there, is Treylon Burks. I know, so we'll see that. But a couple of names of guys that Bears fans can kind of hone in on and just say, it could be there for a possibility at pick either 39 or 48.
Yeah, so let's start with who isn't going to be there. Rather the ones that I'm, almost certain. Garrett Wilson's not going to be there. Chris Olave is going to be gone. Drake London, there's a scenario where he could slide. I don't think he gets out of the first round, though. So let's count those three. Burks, I suppose it's possible, but I think people view him as unusual enough to land in round one. And I suspect he'll end up being, a top 25 player or what have you. I think just that run of teams that need receivers in that range is going to be too greedy, and I think they're gonna snap him up. And I don't know who I'm forgetting, but Jahan Dotson would be the sixth guy if I've mentioned five already. So I think there's a good chance that those six go in round one. Dotson, 50-50, maybe 60-40 he goes in round one. Then we get into the George Pickens. Does he make it into round one, or is he there at 39? Sky Moore from Western Michigan, really intriguing kid, high school quarterback, corner. Stepped right in that, looked like he'd played receiver his whole life and has turned into a nice little player. Watson, interesting player, can be used in the run game, unselfish guy, leaping ability, certainly has to be on the map. I know a player the Bears have done a lot of work on, would probably, I think maybe at, 39 they pick at or whatever? Yeah.
Yep.
I think it may be a little rich for 39, but Alec Pierce from Cincinnati, he's obviously, I've heard him described as a faster Adam Thielen, and that type of guy, I guess. Pierce makes a lot of sense. So if they don't go receiver at 39, or there's and where's their next pick? It's got to be.
It's 48. That's the 48. Pick they got for Khalil Mack. It's
right. Yep. So that pick, that could be your receiver, especially if they feel like they have a corner, a lineman, pass rusher, I would think. If one of those players they feel like is just too good to pass up, they can double back with the receiver in that say. Jalen Tolbert, too. I forgot about him. I really like him. And,
me too.
You saw him in Mobile. And so, that's kind of the lot of characters, at least in terms of the guys who could, contribute right away. John Mechie with the injury, I would say probably not. David Bell, maybe a little bit lower, but those are all guys in that mix.
Right. But you just rattle off like 10, 12 names off the top of your head here. And I keep telling our listeners, I keep telling fans, I'm like, listen, there's going to be talent here. So if they don't go, because I think they're going to go offensive line, defensive line possibility for two picks, because, with the Oakland Joby contract falling through, I know they signed Justin Jones and they brought in the kid from the Colts, but he's more of a rotational defensive end. I still think that three technique is a prime position. If a guy that the kid I like is the guy from Houston, is Logan Hall. I know he's been targeted as a defensive end, probably a five technique, but I could see him playing that three technique in this system, especially with that get off he's got. So I think someone like that, someone like Travis Jones, don't think fans out there don't think that they're not going to go defensive line here with one of these two picks as well. So the depth here at receiver is pretty talented. So besides the receiving group, which other position group do you think will make the biggest impact coming out of this draft?
Good question. I would probably say offensive tackle has a pretty good chance, assuming that, people are looking at Quanu and Neal as tackles, and, some of the other guys who, you could put them at guard and be fine with them there. I think that's a pretty strong group overall. And, it's interesting with the Bears too. Obviously, I think, you would assume maybe it's a little bit more focus on the interior, but you could see them certainly drafting somebody who could play either tackle or guard, and then just sort of figure out what you have with, with Tevin Jenkins and Borum and everybody, and kind of, pick the best five, if you will. So, that's certainly one approach I would say to filling that need. But yeah, I think with, Ekwonu, Neal, Charles Cross, Trevor Penning, Tyler Smith, the kid a lot of people have kind of warmed up to. Bernard Raymond, I think, could be a guard, but he could also play tackle too. I'm a big fan of Abraham Lucas. I think he's got to be on the Bears' radar as well from Washington State. It's pretty good top-heavy group, and then the middle is okay. So if the Bears, are thinking offensive line, I'm kind of of the same belief as you that, with the defensive line, there may be a priority to get those guys because it's good at the top, but I think there is a diminishing return point where, when you start getting into the latter stage, I think tackle's a little bit more shallow than, say, receiver. Receiver is less top heavy, but there are more options.
Right.
But tackle, there's really only about a dozen I like, but of the dozen, I think a high percentage will be pretty good.
One guy I've been pounding the table for here is Nicholas Petit-Ferre from Ohio State. I really like his potential. He's not fully there. I mean, he's still got some work to do, but just the athletic ability, the way he gets out of his stance, and not just because he played with Justin Fields at Ohio State. That's not the reason why I like him.
Right.
I just like the athletic ability. Obviously, the Bears are going to that, that Kyle Shanahan, sort of, a wide zone scheme. You're going to need athletic blockers. So I think he's a kid too. If he's there, maybe 48 or 39 might be a little too rich for him. We'll see how it goes. Maybe they trade down. So that's another name that I've been pounding the table for here is Nicholas Petit-Ferre. What do you think of that kid?
I mean, I think you could get him in the third round. I think you can get him in the third. That's at least the feedback I've been getting. On the one hand, I think people made too much of his struggles against Hutchinson in that one game. Yeah, it was, it's easy to pick on somebody because you watched a couple highlights or whatever. I mean, you obviously can see some of the growth a little bit, and they ran obviously kind of a zone scheme and an RPO type of offense. So there would be some easy crossover there. I also think, Ohio State fans were a little bit jaded in the sense that he was such an elite prospect coming in, and he never quite fulfilled the promise. I think he was sort of, I can't remember exactly where he was, but I want to say he was one of those elite recruits. And, I sort of feel like there was a little bit of a stigma against him, but, huge wingspan, big hands, he's pretty fluid guy, like you said, athletically, did some better testing at his pro day too. I mean, he was, I think the combine vertical jump number was shockingly low. And then I think he did like 6 inches better or something at his pro day. So, yeah, I mean, he tends to get really high as some of those tall linemen do, high in his stance. And, there's still a little bit of awkwardness in his movement at times, but easy to see with his, light feet, good frame, long arms. He's got all the right pieces to put it together. You put him with a good O-line coach, and he could be a fine tackle in this league. Right,
especially like I said, if you get him lucky enough to get him in the third round, I think that's a high quality value pick there for them.
Yeah, but, 60 to 90, I would say maybe is the range for him, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, we'll see where that kid goes, but yeah, I mean, I think he could be potentially come in and eventually be a starter here at left tackle. So, and in terms of there's a player generally, you're looking back at some of these drafts and 2-3 years down the road, you're like, oh man, that guy really flew under the radar. I mean, like, where'd he come from? And whether the kid goes in the second round, it goes in the third round, or he goes day 3. Is there a particular player or players that you have identified? Kind of researching this draft, scouting these players that you think, hey, you know what, 2-3 years from now, this kid's going to be like, huh. This kid really made an impact in the league, and we didn't think he was going to be that big of a player.
Yeah, basically, how did he go as late as he did? Right. I mean, that's the question we end up asking every year. I guess a potentially obvious one would be, well, I shouldn't say obvious. If you follow the draft closely, sometimes I'm so in the weeds on this stuff, I don't know what other people know and everything, but. Jelani Woods was kind of a combine, he had his little star day when he worked out at 253 pounds and ran a 4.6 and, crazy jumping numbers. And people looked and said, hey, okay, this kid averaged 14 yards a catch and, had touchdowns in 8 different games. And, he run blocks well. What's not to love? But, he's really essentially a 1-year wonder after transferring from Oklahoma State. But, it was like the light just went on and the opportunity was there, right? They weren't going to ever really feature him at OSU. He moves to Virginia and suddenly he's part of a big passing game there. And, is there still some rawness to his game? Yes, he's not quite the big play threat everyone wants to make him be, but I would say, at tight end, he and Greg Dulcich from UCLA.
Yeah.
I think both those guys, I think, are going to surprise some people what they can do. Like you said, maybe not right away as rookies, but down the road. Obviously the injured players, if they come back, who knows where Justin Ross is, in his rehab, but he was so good as a freshman. I would probably say the same thing for Pickens as well. His 2019 tape is downright exciting.
Right.
John Mechie, I think, is a really good player who once he's healthy will be good. And, I'm just trying to think of maybe that real diamond in the rough. Tyler Smith, I mentioned earlier, the Tulsa tackle,
Yep.
A lot of penalties, some sloppy. He's a bear hugger. When he gets beat, he kind of panics a little bit, but I've seen enough, flexibility, strength, power, unusual traits for a guy who was lightly recruited, at a sub Power 5 school or whatever. There's something about him. I kept going back to him and saying, I think there's a player here. I really think, and if you can cut down on the penalties and get him to not be so reactive and grabby like that, I mean, he could be fun.
Yeah, I mean, naturally, he's got the athletic ability, the size to play left tackle or even left guard, if you will. But yeah, I could say he's just technique-wise, you can see he's a little rough around the edges, but that's definitely a guy you could just, what I call developmental prospect. Bring him in, you coach him up, and next thing you know, you have, like I said, a diamond in the rough. So yeah, but this is gonna be a very, very interesting draft here coming up, in a couple of weeks. So see what happens. In terms of around the league, like we're focused on the Bears here. In terms of around the league, what are some of the storylines you're going to be looking for when heading into this draft?
Well, one of them is a non-draft one, and it keeps coming up, and we kind of keep ignoring it and pushing it to the side and say, well, that's not a thing yet. But what's going on with Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals? And I don't necessarily think he's going to get traded by draft day, but the story's not going away. And whether it's player-driven, agent-driven, team-driven, all of the above, I don't know, but that's one. I think a veteran receiver will go, whether it's, in the next 13 days or perhaps on night one of the draft, whether it's, DK Metcalf. I don't know about Deebo Samuel. I haven't talked to San Francisco yet. I haven't really heard whether they're even interested in trading him, but, Terry McLaurin in Washington. I mean, again, I don't, they would only be trading them for financial reasons, right? I mean, the same reason the Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill and, the Packers traded Devontae and so on and so forth. I mean, I wrote about that story today. I think there's going to be an earlier than expected or early run on receivers because the theory is, okay, you lose talent, but you get a player at 25% of the salary or whatever the number ends up being. That's a real motivator for team. If quarterback salaries are as high as they are, great. Wide receivers, some team can deal with it, some can't. So that's a position that I think, the draft will end up providing those teams a little bit of relief for.
Yeah, obviously here in Chicago, the rumors are maybe Green Bay could be sniffing around DK Metcalf, and that's one combination you don't want to see here in Chicago with this Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf teaming up there in Green Bay. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like around the league, I just kind of just pulling back and looking and seeing what's going on. It's been a real busy offseason, real crazy offseason. Between the quarterback movement, the receivers, and the big money and all these trades. So just a couple of questions I have for you in terms of the just overall league. Like, what is Bill Belichick doing, an offensive coordinator? Please tell me he's not going to put Matt Patricia back there or Joe Judge as offensive coordinator with I'm a big Mac Jones fan, and I do not want to see that kid being coached up by Joe Judge or Matt Patricia.
Yeah, I mean, Bill has always kind of done things his way, right? And he's made, unpopular coaching hires, unpopular draft picks, and, more often than not, it works out. He's been very sort of, coy about the whole thing and suggesting that, yes, those guys are going to be coaching on the offensive side of the ball. It wasn't entirely clear who was calling the defense last year. Was it his son, Brian? Was it Jared Mayo? Was it him? What was going on? So hard to know where this one goes. Bill typically doesn't go outside the building very often. He hired Dean Pease a few years ago. Dean's a really good defensive mind, but he and Bill didn't see eye to eye. They weren't on the same page, so it didn't work out. They hired the offensive line coach, who I think is with the Jets now, Dave, blanking on his last name, but I remember him ripping him a new one on the sideline in the AFC Championship game at Denver. So I just sort of feel like Bill likes grooming his guys, and when two of his former coaches come free and they rejoin the staff, you can kind of work out titles later. I mean, the answer is I don't know, and Bill may not let it be known until we get to a certain point when he's comfortable saying, okay, so and so's doing this and so is doing that. It's going to be an unusual situation, no doubt about it, especially with the young quarterback, as you pointed out.
Yeah, that's. I don't want Mac Jones to get ruined by anything by Matt Patricia or Joe Judge has to coach him up with. But I see Aldo just popped in the chat here, bro. Real quick though, I did see something on Twitter that you were involved in breaking a story, or you had parts of the story in terms of Tom Brady possibly if there wasn't the whole Brian Flores a lawsuit that he could have been part owner of the Dolphins. Is that true?
Well, yeah, this was now. So I was on the podcast, You Pod to Win the Game over at Yahoo Sports. Check it out if you haven't. But Charles Robinson's the main host, and he rotates in as guests. I happen to, I'm in there more often and during draft time. And so, he said, usually we have a script that we kind of, not a, word for word, but a guideline to keep us going. And it was blank for the first block. He said, I'm just going to throw this scenario at you. I want to see what you think. I kind of knew where he was going, but yeah, he laid it out. He had a great sort of explainer about kind of the mechanisms that were at play, about how, Bruce Arians' retirement actually had something to do with the Brian Flores lawsuit. And it's better left to have him kind of describe that. But yeah, there was a scenario where the quarterback that was left, unnamed in the suit, that Ross, the owner, asked Flores, the coach, to go court, and try to bring to the Dolphins. A lot of people thought it was Deshaun Watson. It was actually Tom Brady.
Wow.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
And now there's this sort of, galaxy brain version of, hey, did Bill Belichick accidentally text the wrong Brian? That whole story, right? Or was he playing 44D chess, and this was his way of kind of blowing up Brady going to the Dolphins? I mean, Bill's incredible, right? We all give him that, but I don't know. That may be a little beyond his abilities to see that far, that many moves ahead, right? Magnus Carlsen of NFL coaches. But yeah, I don't know. I definitely think that there was some tension between Brady and Arians. There was a scenario in play where Brady wanted to go to Miami. There was a scenario where San Francisco was a possibility. And one way or another, it led to Arians moving up to the front office and Todd Bowles getting the job. So I'm sure they'll try to sweep it under the rug and keep that as, Pollyanna-ish as they can. But we all know there was something else a brewing. And I think there was a lot more than, including this story than we really know.
Sometimes the things that we never hear about are more interesting than the things we do hear about.
Oh, yes.
100 times out of 100. Absolutely. Even 3 or 4 years later, this story would have been like, what? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, whenever, and that's a good reminder to us journalists, like, just because a transaction happened doesn't mean there isn't a story behind it, right? You make those calls and you find out, hey, how did this go down? And who was this person talking to? And, it sometimes reveals the craziest of scenarios if you do the right homework.
Awesome.
Eric, for those people who are listening to the audio version of this show, could you let them know where they can contact you on Twitter and where they can find your work, and tell us what you're working on that's coming up? Yeah,
you said contact me. I thought you were going to have me give out my cell phone or something like that. Like, whoa, buddy, hold on now. Yeah, I don't want these people reaching out to me. Kidding. Yes, Twitter is Eric, ERIC _Edholm, EDHOLM. And I'm just cranking out the draft reports. I've got about 70 of them so far. I've got my overall rankings there. And if you wouldn't mind me plugging the in honor of our late colleague, Therese Paylor, who died a little over a year ago. His all juice team was, his baby. That was, effort, performance, attitude. He tried to fill a 22-man roster with, the guys that really he liked the best, but the guys who checked those boxes. And we pitch hit for him last year after his passing, and we tried to do our best. I feel a little bit more confident about this year's group. It's going to drop early next week, and we're real excited about it. So that's one of the big things I've been working on lately.
Fabulous. We'll make sure to share that on our social media
Thank
channels.
you. I appreciate that.
You're the absolute best, Eric.
Yes, sir.
Although the guy that's going to follow you is going to argue that he's the absolute best. Do you know this gentleman here, Mark Schofield?
Yes, I do. In fact, I would argue it's guaranteed he's better than I am. I would have Mark on 10 times out of 10 over me. He's the quarterback whisperer, the guru. Although you guys don't have any quarterback questions, I don't think there's anything to ask.
I've seen Mark's rankings. I got a couple questions for his rankings.
Okay.
Oh, look at that.
I may stick around and listen here because I need all the help I can get.
No, listen to what I'm going to say, Eric, and do the exact opposite. That would be the best.
No, never.
Eric, you're the absolute best, second best. That's to be determined, I guess. Thanks again for spending some time with us today.
I had a great time, fellas.
Thanks, Eric.
Mark, how are you, my friend?
I am doing well. I'm excited to be back. I'm excited that it's under different circumstances than say last year's appearance when, as Eric kind of pointed out, you guys were in the middle of the quarterback discussion and what you guys were going to do with respect to the quarterback position. It's a little different this year. Obviously, the Bears have a different draft status as they did in contrast to last year. But at the same time, you don't have to worry about trying to make sense of this quarterback class. So you guys at least have that going for you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we are thrilled, Mark, to not have to be looking at this year's quarterback class. But I mean, if I remember correctly, your team, obviously you're a Patriots fan. Your team was in that quarterback, merry-go-round, if you will, last year, and then you ended up with Mac Jones. Obviously had a pretty good season. Mac Jones was a guy I was high on coming out of college as well. And so I just asked this question to Eric earlier. I'm like, what is Bill Belichick doing in terms of the offensive coordinator? I mean, please tell me Joe Judge or Matt Patricia's not going to be calling plays in the helmet of one Mac Jones, please.
Yeah, I mean, Danny, I was very interested to hear what Eric said in response to that. And I was hoping he was going to break some news that they had hired Bill O'Brien, or they convinced, Sean McVay to, suddenly become an offensive coordinator, because as it stands right now, it looks like it's going to be either Joe Judge or Matt Patricia. And Bill Belichick has sort of said that, look, these guys have offensive backgrounds. Joe Judge with some time as a wide receivers coach. Patricia sort of started out on the offensive side of the ball before moving over to the defensive side of the ball. But it's worrisome to me. And it's not just me. Look, Dan Orlovsky said it, I believe it was last week, that in terms of the entire NFL landscape, this is the thing that concerns him the most about any single team and a single player, is the idea that Mac Jones might be in the situation where, like you said, you've got guys that have more defensive or special teams experience calling plays for him. And it's concerning on a number of levels, not just, guys that are going to be calling plays for the first time now, working with a rookie, a second year at this point quarterback, but the continuity around the quarterback position, around the young quarterback, is so critical for a young quarterback's development. It's something that obviously Bears fans are keenly aware of, given the Mitchell Trubisky situation and now year 2 of Justin Fields. And the idea that you are now putting Mac Jones in the hands of a first-time play caller, regardless of who it is, and it's now his second offensive coordinator in the NFL, his third offensive coordinator in 3 years, dating back to his time at Alabama. That's not a great start. That's not always conducive to successful quarterback development. And so it's certainly concerning. We'll wait and see. Hopefully they figure it out. The Patriots over time have sort of been able to figure things out as they move along, but it's not the best setup sitting here right now, 2 weeks before the draft, this uncertainty about who's going to be calling plays next year.
Yeah, it's just really puzzling, and it's not like Bill Belichick not to have a plan. So I'm sure he's got a plan. So we'll see how it plays out. But obviously, we are Bear centric here at the bar room, and so we're going through the Bears. We talked about it earlier in terms of they don't have a first round pick, because of that Justin Fields trade last year. They're looking right now at pick 39 and 48. The 40th pick is the one they got from the Chargers for Khalil Mack. So obviously the needs for the Bears, receiver, offensive line, cornerback, those are the three top, positions, if you will, if you throw it up there and say any one of those three guys with those, first 3 picks, should be good players. So going to the receiver side, and obviously this is another loaded class. And I read your article in terms of, the class being, bigger in terms of I think you added 3 or 4 more players this year to your top list than the previous year. So, just go through. I know Drake London is your top guy, and I'm a big Drake London fan. However, coming off that ankle injury and not having that speed, the explosiveness, like a Garrett Wilson, for example, who I think is like 4th or 5th on your list. You're curious how you come to that decision in terms of your London first and then Garrett Wilson, 5th or 4th.
Yeah, I mean, and this wide receiver class, even at the top, I mean, they're all extremely talented players. And as I sort of wrote in that breakdown of these players, you're going to tell me that 1 or 2 or 3 of these different guys are your wide receiver 1. If you could ask 5 different people, you might get 5 different answers. I certainly understand. And there is a case for Garrett Wilson to be a wide receiver 1, whether it's the production he showed at Ohio State, the explosive playmaking skills, what he offers after the catch. There are certainly things that he does at a very high level. What I really like about Drake London, though, he has that ability to be that sort of, he can be an X receiver. Certainly a lot of people look at him as potentially a big slot at the next level, but he has that ability and experience to win on the outside, win on the boundary as that X receiver where you don't get the benefit of the two-way go or sort of, tighter alignment where you have that two-way go, whether it's a slot or a flanker type alignment. He's got a lot of experience against press aligned defenders, and he separates in 2 different ways, whether it's late in the down with his frame, his size, and his ability at the catch point, or even early in the down where you see him against Washington State, you see him against Arizona, where he's separating at the line of scrimmage against press aligned defenders with his footwork, with his release package. I think he's very clean off the line. And I think that puts him in a position to translate well early in his career. Wilson is sort of a guy that he's going to contribute early, but I think it's going to take some time to fill out the rest of his game. I think he's going to be a good receiver early, potentially a great receiver later down the road. I think London can step in and serve in a variety of roles, the X, the big slot, and separate early against press alignment, separate late in the down using his frame. I think that when you watch him, you see a guy that's going to separate as well as he did in the Pac-12. That's going to translate to the National Football League. And that's why I'm high on him. But, whether you like Olave, whether you like Williams, whether you like Wilson, whether you like Treylon Burks, I mean, these are very talented receivers. I think we're going to see whether it's 5, maybe 6 in the first round when the first round is finally done.
And like I said earlier, I'm a big Drake London fan. I kind of comp him to a little bit of Mike Williams. I'm sorry,
Yep.
Mike Evans from the
Yep.
Buccaneers in terms
Yeah.
of being a big body guys, even if he's covered, he's still open because he's got the big catch radius, the big frame. So, is there any word in terms of I think USC's pro day is coming up soon. Is there any word that he's going to be able to work out?
Yeah, they had pushed back like his portion. They're going to have a second sort of pro day for him. So we're finally going to get to see him test a little bit because obviously people are waiting on a 40 there. They want to see some explosiveness testing from him. They want to see those agilities, see what he's able to do coming off that lower body injury. Because, I mean, the Mike Evans comparison is one thing that I've seen a lot. I think it does make a lot of sense. Similar play styles, obviously similar size, guys that can, Evans, London, they're both guys that, like you said, can win in those contested catch situations. And I know there's a bit of hesitation right now when you use the phrase sort of contested catch receiver. People think it's a nice way of saying he just can't separate. And look, as a Patriots guy that saw his team draft N'Keal Harry, another sort of contested catch receiver, I understand the hesitation. I think with London, though, he's a guy that can separate. People sort of gave him that contested catch receiver tag, and initially people were like, oh, that just means he can't separate. He's not going to be able to get away from corners of the NFL. I think when you study him, when you watch him, you'll see a guy that can separate certainly separated on Saturdays, and I think he's going to continue to have that ability to separate on Sundays.
Yeah, like I mentioned, expectation is right now is 6, possibly 7 receivers could go in this first round. So we'll see how that plays out. So I've been talking to our listeners. I've been trying to tell them, hey, listen, there's plenty of players in this receivers club. There's going to be players coming in, day 3 that are going to be able to be contributors here, as rookies. So we'll throw a couple names around, but just kind of concentrating in that second round group. A guy that I don't know if he's going to be there, but a guy I'm really high on is Treylon Burks from Arkansas. I think he's being knocked around now because they don't know in terms of what he does best in terms of is he an X, is he a slot guy? He doesn't have that blazing 4.4 speed, but you put the tape on. The guy is just a physical presence that was 6'2", 225. Talk about a big catch radius. A guy that I've seen actually run away from defenders, SEC defenders. So you talk about good athletes. So, Treylon Burks, you're where do you think? You think he's going to be available in that top of the second round for the Bears, or you think he's going in the first round?
I still think he goes in the first round, and even though his stock is sliding a little bit because of that 40, but I think Burks is a great example of the difference between track speed and Indian game speed on the field because, like you said, you mentioned runner catches a comeback route against Alabama from a stopped position, accelerates away from the entire secondary for a yardage after the catch touchdown. Like, you can't do that if you're not fast. I mean, so he can't run a straight line 40 and 4.4. Well, okay. He's also 225. And the fact that he's running the 40 and 4.5 at 225, I think is impressive. And, his route tree is probably goes, posts, corners, overs, more vertical stuff at the beginning. That's a lot of what Arkansas asked him to do. But I think he's quick enough and he's physical enough to be able to separate on those, that part of his game is going to translate. As far as his role, maybe an X or Z type guy. The comparisons with him and AJ Brown, I think, make a lot of sense because of their size, similar play styles. Tennessee is, interestingly enough, a team that I think in that late to mid 20s would be looking at Treylon Burks. You've obviously got Green Bay and Kansas City as teams as well. And so I think there are teams in that 20 range that are going to be very excited if they get to the podium and Burks is still available. I'd be surprised if he's there for the start of day 2. Stranger things has happened, but I think his ability to win downfield, his ability to create explosive plays, and his success on downfield throws. And one of my favorite plays of his, Danny, was the back-to-back vertical routes he caught against Mississippi, where on the second one, corner's playing 10 yards off of him, Danny. He goes 5 yards downfield. He's still got 6 yards of cushion show to deal with. Throws the arm up anyway. He's like, look, I'm open. Just throw me the ball. And he went up and got it. I mean, you need that confidence as a receiver. He's an explosive ball winner. He doesn't have the sort of well-rounded route tree or the quickness and change of direction skills that some of these other guys do, which is why Olave, Wilson, Williams come off the board before he does, I bet. But I think he's still going to go in the first round.
All right, since you broke my heart with Treylon Burks going in the first round, here are the guys in the second round that I'm looking at for the Bears, and I kind of get your gauge in terms of who you think would be a better fit here for this system. We're talking about Christian Watson from North Dakota State. We're looking at maybe Jahan Dotson from Penn State, or he possibly could be one of the guys that goes in the first round as well. Alec Pierce from Cincinnati is another guy, and a guy that I think is going under the radar is Sky Moore. And then also Jalen Tolbert. I watched Jalen Tolbert as you did probably down in Mobile, and he just looked the part of a receiver. Is he all there? Is he a finished product? No, but I like the way this kid plays, and I like he's got the big catch radius, the speed to get downfield as well. So of those 4 players, who do you think is probably going to be a more realistic shot for the Bears at the top of that second round?
Man, I mean that's really tough because those are 4 extremely talented receivers, Danny, all of whom I think would be contributors and players that could play on day one that could be really productive for any NFL offense, including the Chicago Bears. I really like Sky Moore. I make a lot of Patriots comparisons when I'm doing profiles, but it's hard to avoid the Edholm comparison when you're watching him because he's somebody that, you look at from a size perspective and from a measurables perspective, and you think, yeah, he's probably a slot. But then you watch him and you see what he did at Western Michigan. You see the release package, the violence with his hands as he's beating pressure line defenders and defenders that are trying to jam him. You see the ability after the catch, the toughness over the middle, the fact that he's breaking tackles. I think he had 26 broken tackles last year, which was among tops among college football receivers. Just an extremely talented football player. Forget wide receiver, throw position out the window. Just a fun football player to watch. If he's there, I think – given his versatility, the fact that he can play at the Z, he can play in the slot, he can play X snaps in the NFL, I think if he's there at 39, you give him consideration. Watson is certainly more of that bigger Z, maybe an X type of guy, a guy that can play on the outside, that can play on the boundary, certainly can do some stuff in the downfield passing game. I think he's an intriguing option, but I'm really high on Alec Pierce. Extremely impressive athlete, has the volleyball background, tested incredibly well at the combine, the 40-inch vertical. He prides himself on being that ball winner type of guy, and you saw that catch radius. He had a lot of plays where he was making adjustments to throws that were slightly off target from Desmond Ridder. I got a chance to talk to him a couple weeks ago for a show that I do, and he talked about his pride in making those adjustments and to bailing his quarterback out and to being that sort of security blanket for a wide receiver. And I think young quarterbacks need to have that. I think the idea of Alec Pierce finding his way to Chicago and being a part of this offense and being a part of Justin Fields' development is something that I keep coming back to. And I think, look, at 39, at 48, I would love to see Alec Pierce find his way to the Chicago Bears. He might be there at 71. I know opinions are sort of varied on him. Some outlets, some rankings have him in the sort of 60 to 70 to 80 range. Dane Brugler, I think, has him at 89. I'd be fine with him at 48. I'd seriously consider him at 39. I think the point, that Jordan's making right now, that, his ability to beat press coverage, but seeing defenses sort of treat him with off coverage or give him that cushion pre-snap because of what he can do downfield is a huge sign for him as a receiving talent. And so I love the idea of Alec Pierce to Chicago.
I got a couple more guys, and maybe day 3 guys I want to talk to you about, but just going back on Pierce real quick, do you think he's dropping because of the lack of production at Cincinnati? Maybe this is the 1 year he had just a big year, the injuries. You think it's a combination of all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple of things. I think it's the injuries. I think it's the sort of 1 year wonder situation, Danny. I think it's also a reflection of the talent of this receiver group. I mean, in a couple of years ago, a receiver that put up those kind of combine tested numbers, we'd be talking about as a surefire round 1. We'd be saying, look, this guy's going on night 1. Now it's like, will he be there at 71? Might he be there early on day 3? I mean, I think it speaks to the depth, and this is sort of what I talked about in the rankings piece you referenced. It speaks to the depth of this group, that a guy that put up the numbers from a testing perspective, from a metrics and athletic perspective that Alec Pierce did, combined with the production he had last year, a team that made it to the college playoffs. We're talking about him potentially being available like later on day 2. It's just another sort of bit of evidence that this is an extremely talented wide receiver group.
So a couple of guys, well, actually one guy that I would pound on the table for, day in, day out, and I don't care where he runs at a 40. I just seen this kid's tape, and I think he's a hell of a ball player. Is David Bell from Purdue. I think this guy is if he drops in that 3rd round range, I think he could be a potential steal for anybody. So I think I just kind of your thoughts on David Bell. And there's 2 guys I want to run by you real quick for day 3.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Bell's interesting because, like you said, like a very talented football player, but the testing has really seen his stock fall. I mean, prior to the combine, you're talking about he was in the mix as sort of a guy that could sort of sneak maybe into the 1st round. Now we're talking about him, like you said, maybe being there a little bit later on day 3. I mean, his movement skills, his route tree, it checks a lot of boxes. I think what's really, cooled people on him is what we did in Indianapolis and followed up the game with his pro day. It's just kind of got people wary about, okay, is he going to be athletic enough to translate? Because, we saw from Burks what he did. Burks is also playing bigger, and, he's a bigger guy. Bell certainly isn't that. And so I think that's really what's caused him to fall. But it's hard to sort of watch him on film, see the production and say, are we really going to shy away from somebody just because of what they did at their pro day, just because of what they did at their combine? The problem from Bell is you look around and it is such a deep group where that might make it easier for a general manager to say, well, I'm going to go for Alec Pierce or Khalil Shakur or somebody else that maybe doesn't have the type of production year in and year out that Bell did at Purdue, but it's easier because I've got that testing to fall back on. It makes it an easier decision.
And so just kind of going to talking to our listeners, like people in the chat, and I keep telling them, me and my partner Neil, who's not here right now, but we keep saying this is a deep draft class. There's going to be guys in day 3, like we mentioned earlier, that are going to come in and contribute. And 2 guys particularly that I've gotten zeroed on in terms of for the Bears specifically, because I think the Bears could get 2 receivers in this draft. I think that's how much they need that position to fill, and also the talent here in this. So 2 guys I want to touch base on real quick. Wan'Dale Robinson from Kentucky, like he's more of like a slot jack of all trades, kind of just a quick twitch, just get the ball in his hands and let him go, let him do his thing. And the other guy is Tyquan Thornton from Baylor. I absolutely love this kid's long speed. I know he's being knocked in terms of his hand size, but you put on his tape, you see the explosion. You see him, eating up the cushion of the defensive back and just flying by the defensive back. So, that type of, take a top off of defense kind of speed is what the Bears are looking for. I think both those players would be there in either round 4 or 5 of this draft.
Yeah, and both incredibly talented receivers. I mean, with Tyquan, look, you're talking about a guy that's got true track speed, like true burner speed. Like you talk about giving guys cushions pre-snap, like you're going to have to give him that 8, 9, 10-yard cushion because he's got the speed, like you said, to take the top off the defense. And hand size, yeah, but if there's nobody within 5 yards of him, hand size is a little bit less of a concern. Like if you're drafting him to be sort of a underneath receiver, hitches, shallows, and things like that, then yeah, you might be a little bit more concerned about what's going to happen at the catch point. But if you're drafting him, it's, look, we're going to give you 8s, 9s, and 7s, and that's what you're going to run. Get over the top of the defense and get some separation. And I think that what we saw from him on film, combined with the way he's tested, tells me that he's going to be able to do that at the next level. Robinson's fascinating because I think he's somebody that the team that drafts him might have a package of like 7 or 8 plays plus what you're going to get from him on special teams and say, look, you might get like 4 or 5 touches a game, but you've got the ability to turn 1 or 2 of those into home runs. And that's what he brings to the table. I think that there is a way to carve out a role for him as a rookie, like I said, with a small little package of plays and say, look, we're going to get you some manufactured touches, some screens, some shallow, some things like that, and let you create after the catch with your change of direction ability, with how quick you move, how you're so tough in the phone box, in the phone booth to tackle. Robinson's going to carve out a role. Both of these guys can carve out those small roles early and then over time fill out the rest of it. But when you're talking day 3 players, guys that will be able to give you at least that, plus what they can potentially do on specials, that's great value.
Exactly. But of course, we all know in order for those receivers to get open downfield, they need time, and the quarterback needs time, needs protection, right? So that's another big group here that we're talking about for the Bears is protecting Justin Fields. And Mark, I am terrified at the thought of either Larry Borom or Tevin Jenkins playing left tackle and Justin Fields playing quarterback. So I remember last year I was a huge Justin Fields fan, and I'm excited the Bears went and got him. So I just need it's paramount that the Bears go ahead and fill that offensive line. So going through your rankings, I noticed that you have a little bit different ranking than most of everyone here that I've seen. And in terms of Charles Gross from Mississippi State is a guy, your top tackle. So Neil, I wish Neil was here because Neil actually helped recruit Charles to Mississippi State. So So unfortunately he's not here yet to take care of some family business. But curious, Charles Gross and head of Ike Iguanu from NC State. Evan Neal from Alabama. What was that process for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually Doug Farrar, my colleague over at Touchdown Wire. He did the offensive tackle rankings, but I can understand why he did it. I mean, Charles Cross, you're talking about somebody that did it just like Evan Neal in the SEC at a very high level, movement skills, hand usage, the ability to sort of react to secondary pass rushing moves. Doug sort of termed it like match footwork, where, you've seen plays where pass rusher will hit him with an initial move and counter with a spin, and he has the footwork and lateral movement skills to match that. I think from where I sit, I go Neal, Ekwonu, Cross. I mean, that's kind of how I have them. But similar to the receiver position, Doug's telling me that, look, Cross is my favorite guy. I get it. I can see it because you see those movement skills. You see the ability to match athleticism off the edge, which is so critical for today's offensive tackles on both sides, left and right. You have to be able to match that athleticism. I prefer Neal. If I'm Jacksonville at 1, I'm giving serious thought, even though you just put the franchise tag on Cam Robinson, you added Brendan Sheriff, you might think you don't need to address offensive line. I think you still do, and I would draft Neal. If you're going to tell me it's Ekwonu, I get it too, and I'm a fan of Cross as well. I just stacked them a little bit differently than Doug.
And in terms of realistically for a prospect for the Bears in the second round, we can go through all the names and scenarios, but a guy that I'm really high on, and I just don't see him play it out in terms of some of these mock drafts is a kid from Ohio State, Nicholas Petit-Ferrer. And I think he's a kid had showed the athletic ability. Obviously, the Bears are going to that Kyle Shanahan kind of wide zone scheme system here under Luke Getsy, the new offensive coordinator. So a disciple, obviously, from Green Bay. So he's going to be looking for some more offensive linemen that are athletic, that can block laterally on the move and can maintain their position and all that stuff. So I think Nicholas Petit-Ferrer, he gives you that athletic ability at left tackle. I know he had a bad game against Michigan, but he put on the rest of his tape. But the kid's pretty damn good in terms of his explosiveness out of his stance into that second level for a tackle is pretty rare from what I've seen the last couple of years scouting these guys. So curious your take on him and why isn't he getting much love here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in some ways it's that bad game against Michigan, sort of that recency bias, right? Where some of the last snaps we saw from him that are all fresh in all our minds are getting sort of steamrolled by, some Michigan pass rushers. But we have to remember, one of those guys might go first overall. The other was probably a top 10, top 15 pick before his Achilles injury, and David Ojabo. I mean, those are 2 very good pass rushers he was going up against. Now, of course, the counter to that counter is, you're going to see good pass rushers in the National Football League, so you got to be ready for it. And I understand that. But I think overall, the body of work, what he did on both sides of the line, because he saw some time on both right and left, the lateral movement skills, which you mentioned, I think make him a very good fit for what the Bears are trying to install on the offensive side of the ball with the schemes and the concepts that they're trying to put in, the blocking schemes that they're trying to put in. And I think that makes him a good fit. Now, that might make him slide. You know, some boards, some consensus boards, you have him in that 70, 80, 90 range, which might put him right 71. He might be staring them at the face at 71. If they've gone receiver at 39 and corner at 48, he might be staring them right in the face at 71. You've got a guy that played tackle in the Big Ten. Yeah, he had a bad game against Michigan. That wasn't unique to just him. A lot of guys struggled in that game. And you're talking about a guy that can move extremely well and fits what you're doing schematically.
And in terms of the position group overall in this draft, I would assume receiver would be a group that you think could make a big impact next year. What other position group besides receiver do you think could come in here and as a group as a whole and be impactful?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully the Bears fans, I mean, corner is another one. I mean, you watch this cornerback group. I'm finalizing my top 11. It was going to be similar where I thought about I was going to put a top 15, 16, 17, but my editors were like, look, man, we don't have the bandwidth for it. Just give us the 11. It's a very deep position group. I mean, you're talking about guys at the cornerback position that, you know, they might be, say, CB9, CB10, CB11 on some boards, like Cam Taylor-Britt from Nebraska, Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati, Josh Jobe, Alabama, Zion McCallum from Sam Houston State. These are going to be guys that are going to step in and play right away, whether it's, you know, sub packages, whether it's as a slot, you know, whether it's as a boundary corner, CB2 type for a team that already has a good starting corner. I mean, it's a very, very talented group. You're going to see some corners, like we said with the wide receiver position, Daniel, that come off on day 3, but are going to be immediate contributors, perhaps even starters week 1 of the National Football League. Wide receiver, corner, 2 very good positions in this draft.
So obviously the Bears transitioning to that 4-3, Tampa 2, zone, based system. A kid that I like a lot, and another talking about me pounding the table. I pound the table a lot here, and Aldo gets tired of me pounding the table. But just so you know, is Roger McCreary from Auburn. I mean, I know he's getting knocked for his arm length, right? It's not ideal. But you put on a tape, this guy takes on SEC top echelon athletes and receivers week in and week out. He's always there. He's always, playing well. And he's a guy that's fearless. And I love the way he came down in Mobile and just kind of took up, all the challenges, whoever came up against him and just went up in one-on-one. I really like this kid. I think this is a kid that you could possibly get in that 3rd round range that could come in and be a starter as well. Your thoughts on McCreary?
Yeah, I mean, it stuns me that we're talking about how he might be there in the 3rd round because he's CB5 for me, and I look at him as somebody that if I going to need a corner at the end of the 1st round, I'm comfortable drafting him. I know people are going to look at the 28.8-inch hands and say, that's 1st percentile. He's a massive outlier. You can't do it. Okay, but then like you said, you turn on the film, you watch him get his first SEC interception on a double move in a sort of contested catch situation against Jamar Chase in 2019. That's top echelon talent, like you said, and he's doing it. You watch that game against Alabama. I know Mechie got the better of him on that touchdown in overtime on a pivot route, which is so tough to cover and begin with. But you see him traveling with Jameson Williams earlier in that game. You see them put him on Mechie later in the game because Mechie was starting to carve them up, and he's matching double moves. He's matching comeback routes. He's tough at the catch point. Maybe the short arms mean that he's not going to give you a ton of interceptions. But I think the fact that he has the technique, the tenacity, and the experience against that elite talent coming out of the SEC, I'm a huge fan of his game. I would draft him late in the 1st round. If he's there at 71, it's a run to the podium situation if you haven't addressed corner already.
Right. For me, my favorite corner is McDuffie, but I don't think he's going to be available there for the Bears at 2nd round. I think he's going in the 1st round. But a guy that I turn on the tape, Mark, and I don't know if this is the same way for you, but I couldn't get my eyes off him. And he's not going to go, probably not even going to go day 1 or day 2. Is this kid Marcus Jones from Houston? Talk about an electric, quick twitch player. Only 5'8", doesn't have the size. It might be just relegated inside to a slot corner. But man, this kid is tough, and he's a guy that doesn't back down from anyone. And talk about a guy who's got body control like a receiver, goes out and make those adjustments on the ball and it's an interception. So Marcus Jones, I know he's coming off an injury in terms of his shoulder. In terms of where you think he's going to go, is he day 3 guy?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably more of a day 3 guy because he's probably, like you said, going to have to kick inside because of the size. He's probably going to be more of a slot only guy. I compare him in a way to sort of Elijah Molden, who I really liked in last year's class, who's slot corner at Washington, saw some time at safety, just tenacious type of player, like always was around the football, would help in run support, has no qualms coming downhill. But then you see the man coverage skills. And look, you've got to be a good man coverage corner if you're going to play in the slot, because on the flip side of that two-way go conversation we had earlier about receivers, Now you're giving up that two-way go. You've got to have the ability to move laterally, to get an initial punch or a club technique or a jam on somebody, and then match and mirror them, trying to eliminate that two-way go. It's tough on the inside for corners, and he's got the ability to do that. So I think, look, when you remember that for many teams, that slot corner is a starting position, like there's value to be had there. Even you say somebody's going to have to kick inside, then you're going to have to wait on him. I say, look, if he's going to be a starter, if he's going to be up there for the first play of the game, that there's value there to draft him earlier on day 2.
Mark, I'd like to squeeze in a couple of questions from the chat room. I know we got you on overtime right now. So let me start with Stephen Nagishi. He asked the question, is 3 tech D linemen still a need for the Chicago Bears, and which player would be available for the Bears to take? Danny is shaking his hand saying a 3 tech is definitely necessary. And I agree with Danny. I mean, that's many people were saying that's the most important position in Eberflus's defense. And so a 3 tech defensive lineman, you probably need a couple of them on the roster. Anybody there that you think might fall to round 2 or 3, a day 2 pick that the Bears should consider?
Yeah, I mean, Perrion Winfrey from Oklahoma, who had himself a fantastic Senior Bowl, probably projects in almost ideally as that 3 tech and a 4-3 defense. I really sort of like his game, like his penetration skills. He's got a pretty well-rounded pass rushing package. He's got the technique to win with skill, but he's also got that quick step and penetration skills upfield where he can sort of win on the inside that way. A guy that I've sort of really liked in sort of studying him. I don't know if, he might be more of a 4-eye, but Matt Henniganson from Wisconsin, he played more on the end. If he could add a little bit, maybe he could play on the inside. Fedarian Mathis from Alabama, he's another fun player. I think he could be a 3 tech for this system. In a 3-4, he probably has to play more on the edge, but I think he can slide inside, play at the 3 tech. He's somebody that I would love to see get to New England, pair him with his old teammate and Christian Barmore. But I do think 3 tech is certainly something that the Bears need to address. I think all of these guys, Winfrey's probably going to have to be, if you're going to do that, it's probably the pick at 39. But the other guys that I've talked about, they'll be there at 71 in this draft. They might even be there a little bit later. You might even be able to get some of these guys at 148. And so because D tackle tends to get devalued a little bit in today's NFL, but 3 tech's certainly a need. There are certainly some names to watch there.
If I could jump in real quick, although sorry, just with Winfrey, for me, watching him, obviously Senior Bowl, he dominated. I mean, bull rush, power rush, and he was just unstoppable. But when I put his tape on, his lateral agility, he's got too much stiffness for me to be a 3 technique, in my opinion. And when I'm looking at him, so a guy that, and not in a similar mold, but a guy that I love here is Logan Hall from Houston. And I know he's been based as a 4-3 end or possibly a 5 technique, but that get off, he went a 1-6-8 10-yard split at the combine. I think he's a guy you push him inside. Matt Eberflus had DeBoris Buckner with the Colts last year. I'm not saying he's a DeBoris Buckner type of player, but got that size, that length, and that get off. I think he's a guy that could kick inside a 3 technique. Curious if you agree with that one.
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, Winfrey and DeMarvin are like sort of those like tweener type guys where it's like, yeah, you could probably put them on the edge, but maybe if they add a little bit, you can kick them inside and they'd be extremely impressive players. And with that explosiveness, that ability to sort of get inside and to penetrate, I think Hall would be a fantastic fit. Now that you've brought him up, Danny, for the Bears there, you probably have to do it again at 39. Because I think some teams are going to look at him and say, yeah, you can put him on the outside. Yeah, you can kick him inside. There's a lot of versatility there. And there's production on both the outside and perhaps kicked inside as well that you can lean on and say, yeah, we're going to add this guy. I think I'm glad you mentioned him and brought him up. That's a great call.
Bear Truth 9 asked a question. Are there any top players that you think might fall in the draft because of off the field issues? That happens in almost every draft. The commentators, whether it's on NFL Network or ESPN, are saying it's amazing that this player is falling down, and it usually has to do with something that scouts have heard in their evaluations and talking with other scouts or the coaching staff or family members and friends. Have you heard anything that we should be keeping an eye on?
I mean, maybe Kayvon Thibodeau keeps falling. I mean, can we say that? I mean, that would be a fantastic situation. I mean, I really sort of haven't, the one that keeps coming up is Thibodeau, interestingly enough, is sort of the idea that like, yeah, he's got interests outside of football. He's worried about his brand and things like that. I mean, there are some other players, but Thibodeau is really, the first one that comes to mind. I try to ignore all that stuff. I mean, I have people that tell me stuff, and I just, like when I was with you guys last year, I'll talk about Justin Fields and, whether he didn't love the game enough or he couldn't handle a playbook. I threw that all to the side. I base it pretty much workouts and film. I mean, that's the stuff that I know that I can trust. The only one that I've really heard is what we've all heard with Thibodeau. I don't see that. I turn on the film, I see a guy that should go in the top 5. But again, I'm just a dude with a microphone. I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, you're a really astute evaluator of talent. And my last question for you before we get you out of here is Justin Fields. As Eric Edholm properly said, you are the quarterback whisperer when it comes to draft evaluation. I mean, your work in evaluating quarterbacks, all players is great, but particularly quarterbacks. So you saw Justin Fields' rookie season with the Chicago Bears. What's your overall evaluation, and what should be the temperature for Chicago Bears fans as they hope and pray that this really is the franchise quarterback we've so desperately been searching for decades now?
Yeah, I mean, look, I remain extremely high on Justin Fields. I mean, it was a situation last year which kind of unfolded the way many feared, right? With sort of a lame duck general manager, lame duck head coach. Now you've got new minds coming in, with an eye towards quarterback development. And the goal here is to get Justin Fields where he needs to be. And we've talked about some of the concerns with the offensive line and some of the weapons around him. We talked about ways to address it. But I saw a quarterback on film last year, even with all of that, still showed me at times that, like, yeah, this is the guy. Yeah, the ability to rip throws into coverage. Yeah, the ability to move around. Were there mistakes? Yeah. Were there things that he has to clean up? Absolutely. As with all young quarterbacks, decisions have to come faster. You have to be able to sort of identify pressure earlier in the down. If you're going to rely on reaction skills, that's going to help you on Saturdays. Might not help you on Sundays when the athletes are bigger, faster, and stronger. So he's got to get better from the protection side of things, get it ahead of pressure packages, get it ahead of simulator pressures. But that's as it all young quarterbacks have to deal with. Even, we talk about Mac Jones, some of the mental stuff that he's brought to the table, still has to clean that stuff up as well. But I'm extremely high. I remain high on Justin Fields. They have to help him a little bit. He has to get a little bit better, but it's always important to remember now he gets the benefit of that first full offseason. This time last year, he's doing draft prep, he's doing combine prep, he's doing interviews and top 30s and learning 17 different playbooks. Now, even though it's a new playbook, he has that whole entire offseason now in this new system to get rolling. And so I remain high on him, and I'm very optimistic about what we'll see from him this year and next year and beyond.
Thank you, because that's what I'm trying to tell everybody here is like just take your time, relax. It's a process. We look at the offensive game plan they put for him versus the Cleveland Browns. I could tell you that the people who call him organizing that offense, they had no idea what they're doing. Yep. So thank you for echoing those sentiments.
I'm glad I could help with that.
Oh my God, it's you don't understand how bad it is. I mean, we haven't seen a quarterback develop here in Chicago in forever, so that's it takes some time.
I understand the trepidation and the fear. Just as somebody that had him QB2 last year and was a huge believer in Justin Fields, nothing I saw last year, even with the mistakes, has moved me off of that position.
But just kind of going to this year's draft, and obviously, the big thing was that there isn't a superstar in this group, right? And then now all of a sudden, as it happens every year, guys get pushed up the board. So now we're seeing Malik Willis, a guy I had as my QB2 coming in. I think Kenny Pickett should be QB1, but that's neither here or there. But I see him now going mocked as high as 2 to Detroit, which I think is crazy. It's ludicrous. But I think 3 eventually will go in this first round. Do you agree with that, or you think it's still going to be 1 or 2?
I think 3. I mean, I keep telling people Vegas is so good at what they do, guys, because the number I keep seeing is 3.5 is the over and under. And it's like, I could see 3. I could make a case for 4. It's really tough.
Would Corral be the 4th guy for you?
Yeah. I mean, if we get 4, I think it'd be Willis, Pickett, Ritter, Corral. I think those would be the 4. I think, Willis is the guy that's being talked about as the first one off the board. And, he's my one, and it's because of the upside this year. I think this is the year where, like, if you're to take a swing on upside, you might do it because of the questions about this group on the whole. I think Pickett is extremely talented quarterback. He's my 2. Similar to the wide receiver discussion, you tell me Pickett's your 1. I more than understand that. I can see it with him, the willingness to attack the middle of the field, the willingness to work through progressions, certainly checks the athleticism box, maybe not the way Willis does, but athletic enough. I think we get 4 because teams are going to start to panic. We're wondering about what Carolina's going to do. You see them teams that we all know, Atlanta, Seattle, Pittsburgh, maybe New Orleans. The teams that are sort of thinking quarterback. There's usually a team that comes out of nowhere and does it. You've heard maybe Tennessee at the late half of the first round. And then obviously what Detroit does, they've got 2 and 32. Did they do Willis at 2? I've been told probably not. But that pick at 32, maybe they move up, maybe they package something if somebody starts to slide, or maybe they stay at 32 and do it. But I think sitting here right now, I think we get 4, at least 3, maybe that 4th late in the first round.
I'm sure the legal profession is still upset that you left that.
They're really not, Aldo. They're not upset about that at all.
Oh, we're very, very happy that you're doing what you're doing, because we learned so much. And it's so entertainingly delivered. Mark Schofield, tell people where they can follow you on Twitter, what you're working on, anything you want to promote. Please take as much time as you like.
Well, guys, thanks so much for having me back. Always love coming on. Love what you guys are doing here. It's such a great product what you guys are putting out. I'm huge fans and believers in what you're doing. You can follow me on the Bird app at Mark Schofield. Hey, I did it right. StreamYard mirrors it. I always have to practice it, but at Mark Schofield on the Bird app. Doug Farrar and myself, we were finishing up our top 11 or so at each position. We've got corners and safeties left. I've got corners on Tuesday. Doug will finish it off with safeties on Wednesday, or it's Monday, Tuesday, something like that of next week. Then we'll do top 50, then final mocks, underrated players, things like that. But you can check all that stuff out at touchdownwire.usatoday.com.
Are you and Doug ever going to collaborate on a book, co-author a book?
We've been asked that, Aldo. I'm gonna tell him as soon as I log off that we got more people asking for that, because I think it would be a ton of fun to do.
Trust me, if you guys do that, I'll buy multiple copies and hand them out to our followers here, because anything that you guys write is must read. Really admire your work. Thank you, Mark Schofield, very much.
Guys, thank you so much. This was a blast.
Appreciate it.
Right. Take care now.
See you guys.
All right, Danny. How about that for a Christmas present? Mark Schofield and Eric Edholm.
It's funny for our listeners. Aldo had to cut me off, because I could keep going here all night asking questions and just hogging these two guys and just talking ball and talking draft. So this, like I said, I love doing this. So.
Oh, me too. I mean, when I came up with the idea of calling this network the Barroom Network, it was because of situations like that, where you have such scintillating conversations. And for me, in this particular instance, I just got to sit back and listen to you talk with Eric and you talk to Mark. It's like being at the bar and me being at the corner of the bar and overhearing two people having a really interesting conversation and not paying attention to my wife, who, by the way, is upstairs after surgery. So that's what this has been like for me. And we still have more football talk to go. So, and there's been some questions that I've been collecting in the chat area. But one of the things that I asked you to do, Danny, and you so nicely did, is do your first mock draft and then tell us why you chose these guys and what was your thinking behind it. And maybe if you can recall or jot it down, players that you bypassed in order to pick the player that you wanted. Now, I've got up on one of our banners here your 3 picks for day 2. You started with number 39. I think I misspelled his name, Traylon Burks, the wide receiver out of Arkansas that you just talked about. Tyler Lindenbaum, who has been dropping in a lot of draft boards. He was everybody thought he was going to be a first rounder, but you found him and grabbed him at the number 48 position. And then number 71, Travis Jones, the interior defensive lineman from UConn. Please take it away.
Right. So obviously, with Traylon Burke, I talked with both of our guests here tonight in terms of how big of a fan I am. I think he'd be a nice, perfect, ideal fit here for the Bears. Yeah, it doesn't give you that take the top off of defense kind of speed that you look for, but it gives you that big body at 6'2", 225, a guy that can be, motioned out, can be an X, can be a Y, can line up in the slot. Heck, I've seen him lined up in the backfield. So a guy that, that a lot of comps, and Mark mentioned it, AJ Brown from the Titans is a guy he gets comped to a lot. So, both guys think that he's probably going to go in the later half of the first round. And that kind of broke my heart, because I'm just hoping that guy just somehow finds his way, dropping. And And I've heard because some teams are just unsure in terms of where to line them up, in terms of, that speed, and they want to, not sure how to use them. Like, I'm just saying, all right, let them drop to the Bears, and we'll take them, gladly take them and make them, a centerpiece in terms of, the receiving core here for Justin Fields. So big Treylon Burke fan in terms of his overall, ability. Like, again, big body, a guy that I saw him, like Mark just mentioned, we on a stop route, caught the ball against Alabama's defense and turned and ran away from defenders. So yeah, he doesn't run a nice, 4.4 clean 4.4 at the combine on a straight line track. But he's a guy, when you put on the tape, he's faster than what he times. And again, with that frame, with the ability to extend outside his frame and could give up a big catch radius to the quarterback, I think he's a guy that you could possibly, build a receiving core around him. So, that's a guy that if he's there, the Bears got to jump all over him. But again, more and more, and you're hearing bottom of the first round, you're thinking Chiefs, maybe Packers, but there's also talk about maybe those guys moving up. Both those teams, the Chiefs and the Packers, may be moving up for one of the bigger name guys. So if something like that happens, or maybe they make a trade for a veteran, like we mentioned, DK Metcalf could be available. Maybe this guy kind of falls down and trickles down to the top half of the second round. So that's why. And the mock that I did, I ran a mock simulator, and he was sitting there looking at me, and that's basically how I went with my mock. Is I went best available. And that he was the top rated guy from my board, at least. And that's why I went Treylon Burke, and he filled a need as well. So that was like the perfect storm there. A guy with the top rated guy on the board, and he fills a need. It's a no brainer. That's why Treylon Burke was my first pick here.
And people in the chat room are saying you got to be dreaming that Linderbaum is going to be available at 48, but that's who was there, right?
Yep, he was there in this simulator, and again, he was sitting there, and I even looked at him in terms of pick 39, because I'm like, well, if him and Burke in terms of grades are pretty similar. Both guys in the top half of their group. Obviously, Linderbaum is a top rated center. Linderbaum is dropping guys, and the reason he's dropping is some of the measurables aren't ideal, right? And you talk about his arm length is a little bit shorter than what you would want. It's like 31 and 1/8. And again, for center, I'm not really too concerned unless it's sub 30. I'm not really too concerned in terms of arm length for center, because those guys are generally more closer up front to closer to the defensive lineman, so they don't need the big arm length and all that stuff. And plus, with centers, a lot of times it's more about leverage, about hand usage. How does he use his hands, and how does he go ahead and be able to manipulate defenders and execute his assignments and his blocks. So that's the main thing here with Linderbaum. But 6'2" at 302. Ran a 4.98 40, had a 7.143 cone at his pro day. Only 24 reps on the bench. So, some of those things are dropping. I think the latest mock draft I saw from Mel Kiper Jr. had the Jets trading up back into the first round at pick 31 and getting him. So, that's a scenario where, he had him going in the first round. But I'm seeing a lot of things where he's dropping out of that first round. So, and the reason why I took him here for the Bears, you might say, oh, the Bears trying to get the kid from the Packers. Well, that guy, he can play either guard or center. I think you bring in a kid like Linderbaum, and he's your center. And he's an ideal center for this system. You put on the tape for Linderbaum, and you look at his, the foot quickness, the lateral agility, the ability he can move laterally side to side and maintain his blocks. The way this guy attacks that second level run fit, in terms of just sprints out of his stance, gets to that second level linebacker, is able to seal him off and pin him. The way he executes those reach blocks, right? Those are those interior defensive linemen that are outside his frame here, and the way he can get snap the ball, reach to that defensive lineman, be able to again use his hands and leverage. This kid was one of the top wrestlers in Iowa, and then usually centers that are wrestlers in high school turn out to be pretty good football players. So, the way he gets in there, gets leverage, turns his hips, jumps into the gap, and then seals off that defensive lineman is just phenomenal. So, this is a kid that is bar none at the top center in the draft. So if he's there for the Bears, he fills a need there at center, but then he also allows you to move Patrick over to guard, and now you fill two positions, right, of need with one draft pick. So that's why I said, a highly rated player falls out of the first round, sitting there on this simulator at least, and I went ahead and grabbed them, and now I fill two positions on the offensive line.
let's stay with that line of thinking that you just brought up there. So if Linderbaum, incredibly falls to that position and the Bears select him, he'd be, the next center for the next 10 years. I think that's indisputable. And now you've got at least a temporary a Band-Aid for the right guard position. We know that at the left guard is Cody Whitehair. So who on this roster would play the tackle positions? Or because then you're faced with the situation of having to sign somebody who's going to be dropped coming up, because really there are no credible offensive tackles available in free agency today, other than players who have had injury histories.
Well, the one guy I come back to is Dwayne Brown. He's still out there, and he's a guy that, he's not the same player he was, a couple years ago, but he's still a viable veteran that could come in on a short-term deal, 1 or 2 year deal. And this, I don't know exactly which pick. It might have been pick 71 with Travis Jones. I think either Bernard Raymond or Nicholas Petit-Frere there. And I thought long and hard about going that way, right? Excuse me, going one of those offensive tackles instead of Travis Jones. But I keep saying that interior defensive tackle position is still a need for this team, right? Now, Travis Jones is not the 3 technique ideal fit, body frame fit, but he's a guy that's got power. This guy takes out blockers. Excuse me, get some water here real quick.
Please go ahead and do that, because that is my concern. The more I do these mock drafts, the more I analyze this, and I say, man, it's almost like the Bears, I hope they don't do this, but that they might be reaching for a tackle, because the quality of tackles who are considered plug and play offensive tackles, I don't think there's that many of them. I think that once you get to day 2, it really starts to deteriorate quickly. So I'm concerned about that, but please go on with your thought.
Yeah, so that's why exactly I was thinking. I'm like, all right, I love Petit-Frere. I've been talking to both of our guests tonight. This guy can come in and play left tackle. I just don't know if he is a starter day 1. But I mean, I would, if I draft him and pick 48 or pick 39, obviously he's going to come in. He's going to be my starter for me. But for me, Travis Jones is a guy that can come in. He can start at defensive tackle. He's a guy that can come in and be one of those guys that could play up over the guard. He's a guy that can go ahead and occupy blockers and allow your linebackers to make plays sideline to sideline. And he's a guy that showed ability to get up into the gap and cause some penetration, cause some disruption into the backfield. So that's why I'm very high on him. For me, his grade was a little bit more higher, and I think it'd be a bigger impact. Yes, the offensive tackle position is still a very big need, and I think someone in the chat earlier asked me to pound a table for either Borum or Tevin Jenkins to play left tackle. I'm sorry, I will never pound a table for either Borum or Tevin Jenkins to play left tackle. I'll pound that for them to play right guard and right tackle. I have no problem with those guys. The combination, however you want to do. You want to do Jenkins at tackle and Borum at guard, or flip them around. That's cool. I'm good with that. So that's why if you go ahead and you put, say, for example, Tevin Jenkins at tackle, right tackle, you put Borum at right guard, or in my scenario here, you put Linderbaum in center, you put the kid from Green Bay over at right guard. Now you have Borum to be able to be a swing tackle, can give you a backup in terms of left or right. But in terms of starting every day, for 17 weeks, I would be terrified to see one of those guys being my full-time left tackle.
There you go. You ever been to a bar, Danny, and the bartender yells out, "Last call, last call," and right at that moment, one of your best buddies shows up?
and he's half in the can already. There he is.
Neil Stopchinski in the house.
What is going on, guys?
You are, man. How are you?
I am phenomenal. How you guys doing?
You got in here just before Aldo called last call.
Hey, shit, you know what? That's typically how I do it. Johnny on the spot, boys. Johnny on the spot.
There you go. We are very, very happy that you're here. And I know you didn't get a chance to listen to any of the interviews we had with Eric and with Mark. Both times, Danny brought your name up because there were just topics that, like, for instance, Charlie Cross, his name came up, and you, of course, had some a hand in recruiting him over at Mississippi State. So I just want to get your thoughts on Charlie Cross, because Danny, what was it that you mentioned that Charlie Cross?
Mark Schofield had him, or his partner Doug Farr had him as his number 1 rated offensive tackle in the group, And I was a little shocked by that, because I mean, I know he's a good athlete, and I go, he's a good, solid prospect, but I just, over a kid like Ike Iguanu or even Evan Neal, even though personally I think Evan Neal is a right tackle or a guard, not necessarily a full-time left tackle in this league, but that's a story for a different day. But he had him as his number 1 rated offensive tackle. So I was kind of curious how that came about.
Well, the thing about Charles Cross is, he's a dude that when he came into Mississippi State, he was, I think, 6'3", 257 pounds. All right. And over the course of his time in Mississippi State, he gained close to 50 pounds in weight, grew almost 2 inches. He went into the combine at, I think, 6'0", 4'7", and didn't lose a shred of his athletic ability. And the reason why we brought him into Mississippi State was, number one, because he's a dude that has unbelievable athletic ability for his size. He has the traits that he has the athletic traits and the physical traits to where you can teach him love the Play-Doh type of stuff, right? You can teach him what you want him to do, mold him into what you want him to be. He's a guy that also had the frame to be able to handle the weight and also maintain that athletic ability. And that's what was special about him. And that's what made him special at Mississippi State. Great kid, comes from a great family, from an area of Mississippi where it's very blue collar, right? You work for what you get. Phenomenal situation that he came into, and he's just one of those guys where when you sign him, you think to yourself, okay, he's a little bit of a project. He's a little bit raw. We got to put some work into him. But I think by year 2, he was starting. And he was one of those, perfect kind of situations where what you think he could be is what he ends up being. And so, props up to the strength conditioning crew over at Mississippi State. They did a phenomenal job and we're talking about two different crews now, right? Because he came in under Joe Moorhead and Luke Getson, and he finished under Mike Leach and I forget the offensive coordinator they have now. 2 different strength staffs. And so, but the thing about the kid is that he's not about the limelight. He's a hard worker. Again, blue collar kid from a kind of like a modest, situation. Those type of kids you can always depend on to, put in the work, to, work their ass off and get to where they need to be. The thing about Charles Cross is that he's got the size, he's got the length, he's got the athletic ability, he's got the feet, he's got the physicality, he's got everything you need, and it's just a matter of who falls in love with him. There's reason to think that Iguanu, Cross, and Neal could be the first tackle selected. I may be biased, but I think Charles Cross is that guy.
Yeah, and the other time we mentioned you is I was talking to Mark Schofield in terms of the depth and the receiver team here, and I just in the group, the class itself, and how you and I have been stressing to our our listeners that don't fret about it. If the Bears may not necessarily attack that position right away with the first 2 or maybe even 3 picks, but there are going to be receivers here in this draft. You get day 3 that you're going to come in and make an impact. And Mark agreed. And a couple of names I brought up for day 3 were Wan'Dale Robinson from Kentucky and Tyquan Thornton from Baylor. I think both those guys can bring an element of speed and playmaking. Obviously, Robinson's that quick twitch, jack of all trades kind of a player guy. You just give him the ball in space and let him do his thing. If you line him up necessarily in the formation, he'd probably be a slot receiver just because of his size. And then Thornton I've talked about here in terms of previous shows where just his speed, his ability to get downfield and stretch that defense, is an element that the Bears definitely need here on offense.
Yeah, you kind of cut out just a second there. Could you go ahead and go over that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we were just talking about the receiving class, how the depth of the class, how you and I've been telling everybody that you could probably find guys in day 3 in this class here. And one of the kids we brought up was Wan'Dale Robinson from Kentucky. and the other one was
Right.
the kid from Baylor, the receiver Tyquan Thornton from Baylor. So those are the top two examples where you could get guys in day 3 that can still come in here and be impact players. That, you know, if the Bears address the offensive line, defensive line, and say cornerback with those first 3 picks, don't fret over it. There's still opportunity to get talent later on in the draft. And I brought up to Mark what we've been talking about, and he agreed.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty thing about this receivers class. It's kind of similar to last receivers class as well, in the sense that, you know, you have a collection of guys that you know, they have the skills, they have the talent, they have the traits. You know, when we were running through our mock drafts earlier, like me and Danny were going through this, you know, solo by ourselves. I'm pretty sure you felt the same way that I did, that, you know, once you're getting into, you know, day 3, round, you know, 4, 5, and 6, you're still seeing some names that you really like, that have all the traits, that have the things that you could build upon. You know, Wan'Dale Robinson, like we talked about him before, a little bit of a super midget. He has, you know, explosive, you know, tendencies. He's got the ability to break a game open. Tyquan Thornton, you know, ran extremely fast at the combine. He showed up really well at the Sugar Bowl in January, and you know, he's a guy that is really interesting as well. So, like, you talk about guys, you talk about taking day 3 guys, and that's sort of the type of dudes that you take, the guys that have traits, the guys that have things that you like. You just want to figure out a way to work them in your system, mold them up a Play-Doh, like I always talk about. You know, it's going to be really interesting once you get to day 3. It wasn't easy for me picking our 2 5th-round picks and 6th-round pick. It wasn't easy at all. I had to make some cutthroat decisions, and one of them was whether you take 2 receivers or not, and the other one was there's some guys that we talked about the previous, you know, couple, like 2, 3, 4, 5 shows that showed up there, and it's like, shit, man, like, you know, we got some guys that we really like. What do we do here? We have too many needs, way too few spots. It's you know, Poles is going to have to, you know, he's going to have to do some work, you know, once we get into the tail end of this month.
Yeah, and although Neil, it was miscommunication on my part. I didn't tell him we were only doing the first 3. He ended up doing all 6 picks. So I think if you want to pop his mock draft up there, we can make fun of his mock draft.
Go ahead, Neil, take it away and tell us Christian Watson, Tyler Smith. I think we all have to agree that if the Bears walk away with these 2 players in round 2, we'd all be ecstatic about it. Neil, first of all, tell us what mock draft generator you used, and then tell us the reasoning behind those 2 guys in round 2.
Use the same one as Danny. Use the Draft Network, and
okay. Excellent.
I went through a couple, and it just so happened to where it worked out perfectly to where Christian Watson was available at 39. I said, well, you know, you got to go ahead and take that. I also had one where Zion Johnson was available at 39. I took that one too. Mm-hmm. And that was also a phenomenal draft in terms of attacking positions of need that we needed to take in. And also guys that we talked about that we really like. Every single one of the 6 picks were guys that me and Danny loved. And I thought, shit, that's a really good one. Then I did this draft. I thought, shit, it's even better, man. How did you get any better? Like, I got to stop right here. Quit while I'm ahead, right? So Christian Watson comes in number 1, dynamic guy with length, to stretch the field, just eats up ground off a snap as he's climbing the route. Tyler Smith comes in next. Tyler Smith was available at 48, which also blew my mind. And we talked about him before. He's a guy that has elite speed. He's got elite physicality, you know, mean streak, all those different types of things that we love, things that we need in our offensive line. And then Travis Jones at 71. Like, how the hell is this guy available at 71? It's unbelievable. So I took Travis Jones at 71 as a guy also with kind of physicality, mean streak, nastiness that you need on the inside of the trenches. And so then we go into round 3 or go into day 3. And, you know, we get to round 5. We're at pick 148. I thought, okay, we still need that corner. Zion McCollum is a guy that I think could easily be taken around 3, and he was available around 5.
Yeah,
you got to take that guy, right?
Yep.
The length, the explosiveness, the speed, the quickness with the agility drills. You know what he shows on tape. He's very well rounded as a press corner. He plays zone. He basically does all of it. He just hasn't done it against the most elite competition, which is probably his only drawback, right? I mean, he just hasn't done it against the best. And so you take that guy at 148. And for the record, Kobe Bryant was also available right there as well.
Yeah, that's the thing I went through as well, Neil, is some of these things were not realistic, but I mean, like for mine, I don't know if you had a chance to see mine, like Tyler Linderbaum was available in both of my second round picks. So I ended up passing him the first round on I picked 39. I took him at pick 48. And then, obviously I took Treylon Burks with that first pick. So, like some of these scenarios were not really realistic, but
Linderbaum at 48 is crazy.
Yeah, that's what I said too. But I'm like, if I'm going to be true to form and run this simulator, I'm just going to go and just pick it. So that's why I ended up there. But yeah, I mean, if you get what's his name, Zion McCollum in round 5, I mean that's going to be a potential steal of the draft, kind of a player, because this guy, we talked about him last week. This guy's got length, he's got the size, he's got speed, he's got quickness. He's a guy that is we compared him to Alontae Taylor in terms of Taylor's more of a physical corner, press corner, where this guy's more of a cover corner with length and size. So definitely a tremendous pick if he's there in the 5th round.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I mean, like Treylon Burke was a guy that through the first 3 or 4 instances of the draft, went in the top 20, 25. I think it was my 5th instance of running the mock where he showed up right around the time when you took him at 39. But he was also there with Zion. And he was also there with, Travis Jones, and Tyler Linderbaum was also there as well. I just, some of these mock drafts, man, I just don't know exactly what we're doing.
Right.
I kind of
but say the scenario plays out.
Stuff isn't really all that realistic.
But say the scenario plays out, Neil. All right. So say you're Ryan Poles and the Bears, and you're sitting in that same scenario. You have Zion Johnson sitting there. You have Treylon Burks sitting there. You have Linderbaum sitting there, and then Travis Jones sitting there. Who was the other player you were talking about? Did I miss one?
It was let's see, Linderbaum, Zion Johnson. You had Treylon Burke. I took Christian Watson at 39. Right.
So all those players are available. Who would you
is there?
Who would you need? Who would you want the Bears to pick if all those 4 players are in that scenario are available there?
I think all players available. I'm probably going Zion.
Yeah, because I think so. I think he's a plug and play starter. Either guard position, and then in terms of coming back at 48, were there some of the other players still available? Was Christian Watson still available? Because I think that's the best case scenario for the Bears is you get these players that fall out of the first round, guys that are supposed to go in the first round, guys like Treylon Burks, Linderbaum, maybe a Christian Watson. They all fall down to you where you have a cluster of them, like was presented to us here in this draft scenario, and now you can possibly, if there's someone not coming, hey, I need a quarterback, or I need a cornerback, or I need an edge guy, and then they come knock on your door and say, hey, all right, we'll give you later a mid-second round pick, and we'll give you all a 4th round pick, which you don't have currently. If you're Ryan Poles, you got to consider that. You got to be able to drop down, and because the depth at the receiver, at corner, at interior offensive line, I think is in that 2nd round range. So it'll be curious to see if that actually presents itself to Ryan Poles.
Yeah, and watching the first rounds happen, the last 2 drafts that I mocked, with the kind of players that were available in round 2, and that's one of those things where I thought about. I was like, man, if these players are available, and we're talking about guys that are of imperative need. We're not talking about the guys like Christian Harris, linebacker out of Alabama, which is sort of a luxury need in the sense that we do need a Mike. And he would be a perfect fit for that position in terms of what we're looking for at the Mike. And so it's really tough. If you're the GM of the Chicago Bears and you have, let's say, 6 players of imperative need and or luxurious need that you would love to take, which one you take? You really have to sort of split hairs a little bit and see what makes yourself more dynamic as a football team. And to me, that was Christian Watson.
And Eric Edholm made a good point as well early on in the interview, and when he said that it's not the end of the offseason once the draft is done, right? The draft is usually like the last real talent gathering process here, other than free agency. But got to remember, once the draft is done, there's going to be veteran free agents that are going to still be out there, right? A couple of guys touched on today was Dwayne Brown, and there's going to be guys that are going to be cut because of the fact that their team probably drafted their replacement in the 3 days of the draft. So that's the thing. It's like, you got to keep in mind that this team that is currently today, it's not going to be a team that's going to be reporting, to Bourbonnais or to training camp, I should say, up in Lake Forest. It's going to be still tweaked here and there. So let's just kind of give them the entire offseason, if you will, and let's see what they put out there on the field, because I think everyone's banging on the table here in terms of Jenkins and Borum at left tackle. I'm telling you, the team itself is not giving those players that type of confidence that they're going to go into the season with those guys at left tackle. So,
Right.
both guys give you something in terms of, potential on the right side, but, in terms of left tackle, that left side of the offensive line is still a huge need. And I didn't address it in my mock draft, but it doesn't say that we won't address it later on in free agency, in veteran free agency.
Correct.
Neil, how's your audio working? Can you stick with another couple of minutes or so?
Yeah, I think I possibly could. I thought I had these guys charged up, man. I guess I dicked a donkey on that. I apologize.
No worries, brother. Did you take us through the entire mock draft? Some of these players in the latter rounds?
No. So once we got past Zion, obviously we got 2 picks after that at 150, and that's where I saw Danny Gray and Kellen Diesch. And, Danny Gray is a guy that I've been tweeting nonstop about for almost 2 full years now. When I first saw him play at SMU in September of 2020, I saw a guy that had elite explosiveness, elite speed, elite separation, a guy that could really stretch the field, and also a guy that really you could stick back there and replace our kick and punt returner absolutely immediately. So he's a guy that, some people say like, yeah, he's got the dropsies though. Well, he can work on that. It's called a jugs machine, right? You can get better as a hands guy, but the thing that you can't teach is the elite speed, separation, explosiveness, all the things that you need to win at this level currently as it stands.
Oh.
Do we lose Neil?
That battery died. The battery either died or we just had a internet interruption. Talk to me and see if we can hear you.
Hang on.
There he is.
I hear you.
Hang on.
I hear you.
We got you back.
Thought we had you back. Yeah, your audio is gone, brother.
You're kicked out of the bar, dude.
We good now?
They're kicking you out of the. There you go.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I hear you.
Yeah, there you go.
Are we good?
I can hear you.
Faint.
You have to yell.
All right. Well, I guess I'll talk louder then.
Yeah. like that loud drunk that comes in right before closing time at the bar. That's where we need you.
That's exactly where we're at right now, to be honest with you. But anyway, so I saw Danny Gray. I don't know did I get through the entire thing with Danny Gray?
Yes.
Okay, so Kellen Diesch, the left tackle at Arizona State. I saw that guy as a guy that I really liked during the East-West game, and there wasn't a chance anybody was touching the quarterbacks in the East-West game. He really opened my eyes there. On tape, he's a guy that he's got quick feet, really good lateral agility, a decent size. He doesn't have the arm length that Danny Schimmon likes, but he's got good enough arm length to be able to either go inside or potentially play on the edge in a pinch. And then Wanya, we've been to hell and back with Wanya talking about him. I don't think we really have to go in depth. Really physical kid. Didn't like the way that he ran in the combine. Didn't like some of the things that he did from an agility standpoint on his pro day. But, he's a guy that plays with physicality. It's what you want in a strong safety position. Available at the 108th pick in the 6th round. There wasn't anybody else there that I really liked more than him. So we need bodies in the safety room. You go ahead and pick that up.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah,
Dan.
for me, Danny Gray obviously he's a quick twitch receiver. He's a guy that's got that quick acceleration, quick takeoff off the line of scrimmage. Played in a high volume offense over SMU. But again, Neil mentioned it. His biggest thing is some drops. He's got some drops on his tape that really kind of, something you have to kind of coach up, right? So that's one of the reasons why he's probably available day 3. But again, gives you that speed element, gives you that guy that gives you the ability to take the top off of defense. So that's going to be something, and provide some return value as well on special teams. Deach is a guy that played left tackle at Arizona State. He's got the size in terms of 6'7", 300 pounds, but yeah, he's got 32-inch arms. So he's a guy that's been kicked inside to guard. So that's a guy potentially that could be one of your future replacements at left guard for once the and now I'm drawing a blank on the name of our left guard. Cody Whitehair. Thank you. Cody Whitehair is up. His contract is up, and so Deach could be a possible replacement there. And Wanye, just like Neil said, he caught my eye in the East-West Shrine game. Talk about an enforcer in the secondary, a guy that can come down and lay out running backs, and provide you some of that physicalness if you're looking for in that secondary. Didn't do well at the combine, ran slower than anticipated 40, looked really out of balance in terms of his back pedal, just looked awkward sometimes, some of the drills. So, he's a guy that, however you put him on tape, he's just a guy who makes plays, right? But he's a guy that's not going to be a guy's going to come down and cover slot corners or cover slot tight ends or receivers. But a guy, again, is going to be a sure tackler in the open field. A guy's going to come down and give you some physicality from that strong safety position. So definitely a good value pick if he's there in the 6th round.
Outstanding stuff, Neil. Thank you for putting that mock draft together, and thank you for popping in here for the last few minutes of the show. I want to, and as part of our closing, I want to let people know that we had the opportunity to talk to Jim McMahon this past week. And one of the things that he shared with us is that he was going to visit Steve McMichael, who, as we all know, is suffering from ALS. This is a photograph that was posted of Jim with Steve McMichael, and I believe that's Steve's better half. And of course, it is devastating to see Steve in this light, but I wanted to share this with you all because there are places where you can go to donate to the fight against ALS and keep Steve McMichael in your thoughts. And whatever you can do, whether it's a prayer, whether it's a donation or anything at all, would be greatly appreciated. Steve McMichael, for Bears fans of my age and a little younger, a little older, they know what his value was to Chicago sports, to Chicago Bears winning a Super Bowl, and just from an entertainment value, before, during, and after his career, Steve McMichael always brought it. He's just a very, very special guy. And again, a lot of thanks to Jim McMahon for appearing on our show this week. Guys, let's go around and share some final thoughts. Neil, I'll start with you because I know that that battery is down to its last half bar.
Well, I mean, the earpieces have already, passed away. I thought I had these guys charged, but shit, I really, dick the donkey on that one. But anyways, guys, I appreciate you letting me come in completely unprepared in terms of how I have the normal studio setup, but glad to share a little bit of mock drafts and wisdom with you guys. Glad to be on the show as always. Glad to have everybody in the chat. Participating. Hey, man, we got 3 weeks left until draft day.
Two weeks. It's 2 weeks. 2 weeks from tonight. 2 weeks from tonight, dude. Yep.
Oh, wait, what month is it? I have no idea. No, but hey, we're getting close, man. We're getting close. It's getting crazy. I have zero time in my life right now to do anything enjoyable outside of watching film. So, hey, we're going to have another great show coming up next week. And I'm not sure what Aldo has planned for us, but we're going to have some awesome stuff to talk about. As always, feed us your questions. Feed us your requests. Let us know what you need us to talk about on the next show if you have anything. And, hopefully I won't have to work out of office again because the technical difficulties have been crazy.
Well, we're really fortunate that you were able to join us. We know that you were taking care of some personal business, and so appreciate you made some time for us. Danny, final thoughts?
Yeah, like I said, 2 weeks till the draft. This is time where everyone starts now in terms of teams start putting the boards together and the final boards together and all that stuff. So and here at the bar room, we're going to be putting together our final board here as well and getting ready for that week long process leading up to the draft. So got some interior offensive line tape. We're going to break it down for you guys next week, and some of the guys you guys have been talking about. I know I forgot who it was, but reached out to me about the Wisconsin kid, Logan Bruss. I've got him broken down. We'll have some Tyler Linderbaum tape just in case if he's available in that second round. And you guys know
there was a few where he showed up in mine too.
Yeah, just so you know, you guys, this kid is picked. He's going to be one heck of a player here for your Chicago Bears if he's there in the second round. So yeah, we'll break some interior offensive line. Of course, I'm still also working on a sleeper list here. Guys that are not big name guys, maybe tail end of the third round, maybe guys even could go undrafted that could bring some value here on day 3 for the Bears. So look for that as well in the upcoming shows.
Great job, guys. We are finished this episode of Draft on Tap. What is it? I'm a little flustered here because my wife is saying, "Hey, are you done with your show? I could use a glass of water or something." Just kidding. But it has been a crazy day, but we were really, really happy that we could all get together here and bring you a show, because we're all so excited about what's happening over the next 2 weeks in preparation for the draft. And the Barroom Network, as Neil and Danny have been saying, is the place to come for draft information. We're going to provide much more content. Greg Gabriel, Neil, Danny, and others here at the Barroom Network will be providing you with tons of content. And so the only thing that we ask in return is that you let others know, that you hit the like button, that you subscribe to the Barroom Network's audio podcast and video channel here on YouTube. That's all we ask in return, and we're greatly indebted. A lot of the fun that we have is just interacting with you in the chat room, and so we'd love to have more people with more diverse opinions and thoughts on stuff. And I've also let people know in the chat area that future shows we're going to have people from who are loyal barflies come on the show and interact with Neil and Danny and others on the Barroom Network. So just hit me up at Barroom Network or email me, Aldo at Bears Barroom, and let me know that you're interested in popping in and having some conversations with the guys.
I just want to say real quick, Aldo, tip that hat to you for being able to do multitasking stuff here, running a show, taking care of your wife, drinking on the side.
Exactly.
So golf clap here for Aldo, our leader here. Great job, dude. Great job.
Thank you very much.
Got to take care of that family, man. Got to take care of that family.
First and foremost, you know it. And I want to thank Caitlin, my stepdaughter and Donna's daughter. I told her, hey, can you come over on Thursday? I got 2 great guests, and I'd love to do the show. And she said, absolutely. And so she's here helping out. And so thank you, Caitlin, very much. All right, everybody. Thank you again for watching. And we'll see you next week right here on Draft on Tap. And our next live programming will be on Monday. Greg Gabriel and I will be talking defensive linemen. So make sure you watch that at 1 p.m. on Monday. Take care, everybody.